We'll just chat, and
Just talk.
hopefully nothing will be a stumper.
Gents, how goes it?
Feeling illustrious.
Illustrious.
Feeling illustrious.
I'm feeling fat, so
Nice.
I'm sure those kind of level out in the middle somewhere, I'm sure.
Trying to form the smallest niche of influencers ever, of the intersection of cocktails and B2B go-to-market. It's just a shame that B2B marketers should not get left behind because their platforms are not innovating in the age of AI. So that's what I'm working on. When AI is disintermediating the content, what gets through is the content that comes from trusted relationships.
Well, welcome back. You're back on the Cheat Code and Friends, and I'm post-holiday here, joined by the illustrious Mr. Josh Wagner and Sean Kester. Gents, how goes it? Is everyone
Feeling
fat or howdy?
illustrious.
Illustrious.
Feeling illustrious.
I'm feeling fat, so
Nice.
I'm sure those kind of level out in the middle somewhere, I'm sure. And so we're joined by, I'm going to do the terrible man who needs no introduction and then give one anyway. But if you don't know John for some reason, maybe you're 8 and just had a birthday and watching this podcast for some reason, or maybe you're under a rock. John, of course, co-founded a number of organizations: Marketo, Engagio, even had some ventures before that, most recently over at Demandbase, and a speaker, board member, author of many ebooks, publications, best
Cocktail
practices,
connoisseur.
the
Leather-bound
modern,
books.
the modern marketing landscape in general. John, welcome to the show.
No, thank you. And as Josh said, also, a cocktail connoisseur, and
That's right.
trying to form the smallest niche of influencers ever, of the intersection of cocktails and B2B go-to-market.
I was disappointed. You did, unlike your third one, you went non-alcoholic, and I'm like, Jesus, I thought I could count on John for some drug content.
Yeah. So, it was January, so it was January, but then I went back to full-on cocktails in February. So
Love it.
Well, he was trying to expand the audience, right? If it's that niche, you got to expand the TAM a little bit.
Yeah.
The Psalm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, John, I'll let you kind of, append my intro with what you're willing to share with folks on what you're really up to now.
Yeah. Well, so as you said, I've sort of been doing, starting marketing technology companies. We started Marketo almost 20 years ago, at this point.
Which makes us all very old.
I keep track of it because Marketo was founded the same month that my son was born, so he's turning 20 soon, which is crazy. I'm really proud of what we built at Marketo and how it's created careers for so many people. But like many folks out there, I'm also frustrated by the lack of innovation that we're seeing from the entire marketing automation category, not just Marketo, but Pardot, Eloqua, et cetera. And that's lack of innovation is happening at the time when we're seeing more change in go-to-market than I think we've seen probably in my career.
Mm-hmm.
SaaS was certainly a major change, and Google was a major change, but this AI thing is kind of a big deal, I think. So
That's what they tell me.
and so it's just a shame that B2B marketers should not get left behind because their platforms are not innovating in the age of AI. So that's what I'm working on, is really trying to reimagine what should marketing platforms look like in the next 10 years as opposed to the last 20.
Yeah. So I guess, my first question there, and then we'll just kind of open it up to what I'm sure will be a shitstorm of curiosity here. How fatigued is marketing? I mean, I find myself asking that question in terms of is that behind some of the lack of innovation here? And just, even for right or wrong, it seems like marketing's gone through so many X is dead. This is the new thing. No, that's not it. Actually, this is that new thing. And to your point, is it working in any organization that we run across? Well, there's actually one. We're looking at a deal right now that is actually driving still the majority of their demand through marketing / demand gen, which is an absolute needle in the haystack in terms of what we're seeing out there. I mean, go to market these days is largely relationship driven sales, I would say, is how most organizations are producing revenue, which is much different than that landscape looked 10, certainly 20 years ago. So like how much does fatigue do you think play into that? Or is it just the age old, like everything's been acquired and everyone's trying to juice as much revenue out of these platforms?
Well, I think tactic fatigue is definitely one of the things going on. I talk about what I call the tragedy of the commons, which is, anytime there's some marketing or sales tactic that comes along that works, right? What happens is everybody starts doing it.
I steal this phrase like almost weekly, by the way.
Yeah. Everybody starts doing it to the point that it stops working, right? So that's why we see the cycle of something is dead, right? Because it works until it doesn't.
Until everyone starts doing it.
Yeah. And then you move, and then we have to all move on to the next thing. And that's connected to the fact that like anytime something new comes in, there's this short period where there's like alpha or like extra profit to be earned from being early in that new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So these two things kind of feed into that.
It's getting shorter and shorter over time, right? Like you think about like content marketing, like that worked for a good almost decade because people were like, wow, you're giving stuff away for free that I used to have to put into, put my information into a form and talk to a sales rep in order to understand. And then I feel like on the tail of that, things just went crazy and went into light speed where it was like days, weeks and days, like someone would do a good idea. And then suddenly everyone's dogpiling on it.
So there's certainly like, I think tactic fatigue, and buyers respond by trying to be more anonymous. They're not filling out the forms. They're not doing, come to our website. We're increasingly asking AI, at least for kind of the initial solutions, and that changes things, and you mentioned, relationship selling is sort of what works today. I think that's a natural byproduct of what's happening because AI has made it so cheap to produce almost an infinite amount of seemingly personalized content.
Mm-hmm.
When the value of the content goes to zero, right, the source of the content becomes where the value is, right, and that's relationships, right? Do I trust this person, right? Do they have the taste and the credibility that I should follow them and learn from them, right? So whether it's like truly a partner-driven relationship or an influencer that we've chosen to follow, right? When AI is disintermediating the content, what gets through is the content that comes from trusted relationships.
Rewinding a little bit to the intro and talking about the creation of marketing automation, Marketo, and the creation of all these professions, something else that came out of that was the profession of a marketer started to become this catch-all. You could be a brand person, a technologist, a content writer, right? Like, wait, I'm a marketer. Cool. Like, what do you do in marketing? There's like a million different things, right? So with the adoption of AI and the move forward of things, what is a marketer today?
There's a lot of stuff out there that sort of say that marketers are increasingly going to become generalists, managing teams of kind of AI agents and experts. Mm-hmm. Do I believe that? Yeah, maybe to a degree. But at the same time, I've also a believer that the more expert you are in something, the better you are at prompting AI to do it. Mm-hmm. Like Chris Penn points this out. If you are a photographer and f-stops and lighting and Nikon versus this kind of lens versus that kind of lens, mm-hmm. right? You can prompt AI to get a photo way better than I can. And so I don't know if it's going to be we're going to quite see that move to purely just generalists, that some people talk about. I do think, well, no, let me qualify that. I hope that one of the things that we will see happen is a resurgence of the importance of, I think, what a lot of traditional marketing things, like understanding positioning and messaging, and kind of knowing and understanding the customer and the market. Right. Those things actually, I think, got undervalued in the demand gen craze. All right. Demand gen was science, and like, can I eke out an extra 1% click-through rate by A/B testing something?
Well, I think
and
that's there's an interesting thread there, because like, I don't even want to call it a bifurcation, because there's so much weight on, kind of, Josh, to your point, the general side of things. But when you look at examples of folks that are really doing it well, to your point, Josh, like and yours as well, John, like specialists in an area that really know their buyer, they know their subject matter, they know the tactics to disseminate it. Like, those are the folks that are really generating something. That you're seeing, like, oh yeah, and John, to your point, like, that also creates that tragedy of the commons and so on. And so I think it's really interesting when you look out there and you're able to see like those peaks of really valuable skill set, and then all the valleys and troughs of like, oh, what's that latest tactic? What's that thing that's getting results? I'm going to dogpile on that, or I'm going to try to use quote unquote AI to scale something out that's a hack. So yeah, I mean, I would kind of retort that and say, in AI just makes it even more critical, because in order to train an AI agent, like, it's like training a human being. And in order to make that agent successful, like, you have to really enable it. And I think that's probably the biggest misnomer that I see in the space right now, is that like there's something you could buy off a shelf that is going to replace all of this, human capital and just everything that marketing has been constructed of over the past 20 years, versus the people that are really succeeding, which is where I see that like high degree of skill and knowledge and understanding. So it's kind of weird to see that bifurcation. I'm curious, John, what your, I don't know how much you can share and so on at this point, but how do you serve both of those, right? Like, how do you find out what really is valuable? But then not everyone is a 10x go to market resource individual, so on and so forth. Like that's kind of what Marketo and marketing automation tools brought to the market, is you could kind of learn those tools and up your IQ as a marketer. So like, how do you serve both of those demographics, or do you?
Well, I have a hunch that one way it plays out is we see a increased importance of what probably people today call marketing operations.
Interesting.
And I'm not, like, I'm not a huge fan of like the GTM engineer phrase. So it's fine, but I don't like it as a replacement for marketing operations. I think what the role of marketing operations can be is the function that is bringing the context to the AI that the AI needs to make good decisions and actions, and then B, bringing the governance, the constraints, the rules, the knowledge of like what we can do and can't do.
Basically ticking and tying everything together that some strategist says needs to happen.
Yeah, well, on the governance side of things, that can just be as simple as telling the AI that, I don't care what you think, yes, I've asked you to optimize click rates, but you can't send more than 2 emails to a person per day. Right? Because an untrained AI might think, okay, I send more emails, I get more click rates, right?
Sure.
So that's an example of governance. And then the third, I think, is, almost like the people who will be teaching the AI the skills. Right? Like, if I want to run a webinar, somebody has to tell the AI that the way I like to run a webinar uses a 3-step promotion process that also uses LinkedIn to invite high value potential people, and that, there's this reminder and this follow up, et cetera, et cetera. Now, could a smart enough AI figure some of those things out? Maybe, but I think at least for a few more years, organizations are going to want to sort of have some control over that, So let's just say you had a MOPS person teach the AI, this is how we do webinars. This is the exclusion rules you always have to apply when you're emailing people in Germany, like all the other, factors, and here's all the context you need to know about everything. I'm hoping that if all that's in place, can your average field marketer now come along and just say, hey, AI, go make me a new webinar, for this audience and for this segment. And it actually does it the right way.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. It was making me think about the fact that you got all these specialized marketers, but in order to really train an AI, you've got to be specialized too. In training an AI, and there's not really a skill set for that yet. And so before you even mentioned operations, I was wondering, like, should it fall under operations? Should the ops people be the ones that know how to train this so it's all standardized across the organization, right? And then it's like insert marketer who has a specialization in some part of the process to go and input that in there. But at least you have, to your point, like checks and balances of how it's all made across organizations.
I mean, maybe the marketer you're inserting is not a specialist in some part of the process, but is a specialist in part of the market.
Right.
Like this is your, they know who the buyers are in the segment. They know their pains. They know their challenges. They have personal relationships potentially.
Sure.
And then, so based on all that, let's go create me a dinner. Right. But again, the dinner has to be set up and run in an appropriate way, all the way down to the fact that the UTM parameters and the naming conventions need to be right so the analytics can work. And that's the trick here is like, how do you teach the AI all those rules and ticky-tacky details so that you can free the human to focus on what they're good at.
Yeah, it feels like the intermediate though, Jon. We're going from marketing automation that created a bunch of jobs to do those things. Now we're telling the person that did those jobs to train a machine to do those things. And then eventually it'll go back to there's less of those jobs that were created 20, maybe 30 years ago at that time.
I think the marketing operations job changes.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. How does that change?
Yeah. I think they spend today a lot of time blogging into Marketo and building campaigns and checking things and loading lists and debugging. Well, why did this person not get an email? Right. And I think AI can do all those things.
Yeah.
Right. But back to the three things I said earlier, right? Getting the context right, which is really a data integration challenge, getting the governance rules right, and then, effectively teaching the AI new skills, right? I think that's still in the scope of what marketing operations is. It's just more strategic and more valuable.
I feel like Justin, didn't we have a team for a while, a quality control team or a QC team, something like that? Like, I feel like that's the use case, right? Like you can hand off a team of 10 people that are just dotting I's and crossing T's to an agent that is trained on the methodology, right? Those types of things that are just super laborious and operational in nature.
Yeah, but I'm still curious, like once you've fulfilled kind of establishing those guidelines and those bookends, like
what does the person do?
Yeah, what's the value going forward? Because your point that you made is a great one, where it's like, hey, why the hell didn't this person get this email, right? Like, because currently there's this layer that I don't know too many exec teams that aren't frustrated with, to where it's like, hey, we said go do this thing, something happened that we don't understand, and now we got to bring in this team or these individuals that have to decode all this stuff for us because they see all this nuance and nitty grittiness. And normally we end up blaming those teams for things that don't go right. And normally resources that no one understands and don't like paying don't stay around for a long time. But like marketing ops, rev ops, that entire bucket has had to be there. And I'm not saying one way or the other whether they should or should not be there, but like they're the only ones that know how to operate this layer of technology that we've created. And so they've got a large degree of necessity. So, and then, to your point before on like the creative side of marketing, like I view that will become even more important than ever. But do you think of that along the same lines?
No, well, yeah, I think creative relationships, understanding the marketplace, the simple line I like to use is if AI can handle the ING in marketing, then the rest of us humans can focus on the market. I.e., it can do the tactical, we can do the strategic, the value added, the relationship, the human stuff.
So does that actually solve sales and marketing alignment?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think, the fundamental problem with sales and marketing alignment, right, is that I like to say sales is from Mars and marketing is from Venus. You have these two different groups that have, different backgrounds, different skills, different education, that are trying to actually work together and accomplish something.
I might refute that a little bit in terms of trying to work together, because there is not a portfolio company that we have where I haven't completely just spun them off their axis by saying that like marketing should be in pipeline meetings and sales should be in marketing meetings. Like that's not, and maybe that's just the fact that you're saying like they're not, they don't think alike, but it just seems so simple to me.
Right. So they're doing a shitty job of trying to work together.
Yes.
But fundamentally, if you ask them, like, what are you trying to do? They're all trying to grow revenue for the company.
Yes.
Right. But as I said, different backgrounds, different skill sets. I think the biggest problem is they tend to think about on different timelines. And
immediate versus, the campaign mentality.
Yeah. I don't know to what degree does, kind of these AI changes solve the fact that, they're looking, they're looking on different timeframes. I mean, the best way I know to solve that is you make sure everybody's got aligned and shared metrics.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say, John, I'm operating within a portco right now, and I'm essentially the revenue leader. So sales and marketing rolls up to me. And I have more of a sales background than a marketing background, but I sold marketing to marketers for a decade, so I think I know a little bit about it. One thing I've noticed in the AI thing, and especially for niche vertical SaaS companies that may be a little bit behind in terms of like how the market perceives it and gets marketing, right? So this company's in the dental space, and the space is just 10 to 15 years behind B2B SaaS, right? It hasn't been inundated with everything yet. Their dental tech landscape is now starting to look like the MarTech landscape of, 15 years ago, where there's technologies exploding and all these different types of things. They're starting to feel it a little bit. But one thing I've noticed that you can do quickly is you can use AI to create a presence. And what I mean by that is old school content marketing, right? Like, I can't tell you how many people in the short time I've been here who said, we didn't see Pure Logic anywhere, but now you guys are everywhere. And, our marketer is using AI to put out a shit ton of content really fast, right? And just to create some blogs, create some stuff. And she's like, what should I prioritize next? What's our partner doing? How do we piggyback on it, right? Like, so just start doing the stuff that we did, 15, 20 years ago, but leveraging AI to do it faster. I don't have a team of 10, 15, or even 5 marketers. I have 2, right? And they're putting out a whole bunch of stuff, and they wouldn't be able to do it at that kind of speed without AI, at their back for some of those tactics.
So the implication is, we haven't hit the tragedy of commons on, some of the traditional tactics in this lesser served industry.
Well, I think that, this group specifically, and especially you, John, right? Like you sold a horizontal SaaS platform that went to the masses. It didn't matter what industry you sold to all of them, right?
Yep.
And, part of our thesis as a group is there's still room in niche vertical SaaS businesses, right? Where maybe you don't have as big of a addressable market that you can go after, but you can get really deep, really fast, and you can build relationships in a different kind of way than you could maybe in a horizontal play. So I think that a lot of the stuff that we call the tragedy of commons, to your point, it still works, right? Depending on the industry and how evolved they are. One of the stats that always blows me away, I think it was Albro who said it, right? The biggest laggards of the adoption of SaaS and automation were healthcare and legal, right? They're just laggard. Well, all of a sudden AI comes along and they're the fastest adopters of AI because they see it as this pure production play, right? And I think that when you see these industries that maybe are a little bit further behind what we think of in horizontal SaaS and the massive, venture plays that get all the headlines, some of the old stuff still works, right? And some of it is because you can build relationships in a smaller market faster, and you can use some of those older tools to do so.
Fair enough.
Well, just to interject in that, I wonder if the reason that stuff works in some of these vertical markets is because they didn't have marketing departments.
Yeah, totally.
Like your dentist just doesn't have a content marketing team inundating the market. Multiply that by 100,000 folks out there, right? Like, so I think the saturation element is a big reason for the state of mind of the consumer, I guess, or the state of mind of the buyer.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
But I think for the most part, a lot of organizations do have marketing departments, or a lot of markets do have marketing departments, right? And I think that's where you're seeing largely the problem emerge. So, Jon, like, I know how long have you been kind of market mapping and doing a deep dive into the space now? It seems like it's a year and a couple of months.
Well, I left Demandbase almost 2 years ago.
Okay.
I spent good chunk of time, 8 or 9 months, kind of figuring out what I want to be doing. And yeah, it's probably about a little less than a year and a half now that I've narrowed in on kind of really deciding to go back to MarTech and try to reimagine platforms for the AI age.
What are the biggest learnings that you surfaced in that process?
Well, let me start maybe I don't know if necessarily the biggest, but start with one that's maybe less obvious. Because if you read the people who write about where B2B technology is going, right? You read all about the agentic AI future, where it's all going to be AI agents shopping from other AI agents, and nobody's ever going to visit a website or open an email anymore. There won't even be SaaS software anymore. It'll just be agents that are doing work and being paid on consumption. And
which is one of the most interesting takes to me, because I feel like that's completely counter to what buyers do in the real world. Just I guess talk to any married couple, like they probably make most big decisions together. So if you won't send your husband, your wife, your partner out to buy something on their own, but now you're going to send an AI agent to do so, I don't know.
Sure, and fine. The AI agent may not actually make the final decision, right? But at a minimum,
the research
it's like, okay, I've evaluated all the options based on how I know you, and here are the 3 best ones, and I've already called the confirmed availability and pre-negotiated this pricing for you. I mean, now go make a decision. Like, so I'm fine. There's hybrids, but like the point being is like, I feel like you read some stuff on LinkedIn and you think that that's going to be 2026, right? Like this is all happening, right there. So you asked me, what are some of the things I've learned? I've talked to over 150 CMOs, heads of demand gen, heads of marketing operations, right? That's not where the market is yet. People are still trying to figure out how can they run their Marketo better. How can I get campaigns out, rather than taking 4 weeks of back and forth? Can I shave that to 2 weeks? How do I make sure that when I run a campaign, I'm not violating, GDPR or can spam, compliance? Like, right. I think we're gonna, I think we're gonna get to that future that people are talking about, and I think it's probably gonna take a longer path to get there than most prognosticators are thinking. So that's one of the things I learned.
I wonder if that's unique to go to market specifically, in terms of like that next day expectation, because you look at a lot of other disciplines and they just seem to be much more realistic. It just I think go to market's probably eaten a lot of their own dog food, or drunk their own champagne, or whatever it is.
I think that's fair. I think it's also driven by the VC and investor community.
Those bastards.
I mean, they're all, wanting to invest in the next Lovable or something like that, where it can just get to $100 million, kind of overnight. And I think that's assuming we're somehow going to be in this like new different world.
Yeah, totally. And I think even the $100 million is only part of it. The belief that you can get to $100 million with 20 employees, right? Like a Cursor or something like that. Like that then sets the table of unrealism in a short amount of time that the average company can't, and the average investor can't invest in.
So again, I think that's also what's, I think Justin's right that it's go-to-market hype. I think it's also, venture hype. A couple outliers that sort of say, well, is actually that the new normal or not? So I don't know. So I think that's one that's sort of interesting. I don't want to say innovation's not happening in MarTech. I think when I first started building, I thought the idea of a marketing operations agent that could build a campaign from a prompt would be pretty cool. And turns out it is pretty cool. But, I think it's also not like that crazy hard to build, and so we are seeing some of the existing players introduce capabilities like that, as well as some startups that are trying to create capabilities like that as a, add on to the existing platforms.
That's a good gateway into, what's your take on kind of the whole innovator's dilemma aspect of, the large company versus the small, new players. I assume, because you're taking, I think we can infer another go at this, that you think that, small entrants can come in and capture a good amount of market share and introduce some real innovation here. But I'm curious how you think about competition in that space.
Yeah, it's innovator's dilemma for two reasons. One, the classic, if you have, what is it, close to $2 billion of ARR of Marketo, are you going to then go and invest in, kind of the replacement to Marketo? Mm-hmm. Harder. But I think the bigger factor, is, architecturally. I know how at least Marketo's built. I'm pretty sure I know how some of these other tools, are done. And I think that it requires a level of focus to re-architect around some of these new ideas that you don't tend to see when a product is a division of a large enterprise.
This is going to be a totally off-topic question here, but just as you said that, I don't think I've ever heard anyone ask you or you address this before. In building Marketo, did you build the product that you wanted to build, or did it ultimately become kind of what you think that product should have been at the time?
Are you asking, was the first version what we wanted?
No, just like that's a good qualifier. What time frame am I talking? I'm like the end of your tenure there.
I think Marketo was really cool for its time. I still remember, even as a user myself, kind of like, wow, I can't believe I can do this. This is so cool. By the end of my time, obviously ABM was becoming important, and you couldn't do that in Marketo. Mm-hmm. And you know what? You still can't do that in Marketo.
Well, that goes back to your point, John, of architecture, just the underlying architecture, right? There's fundamental reasons why you can't do it in Marketo. One is it's never meant to be built that way. Two, it's really difficult to go back. Yeah, it's really difficult to go back and re-architect something to be able to fit a new use case, especially when you're serving, hundreds and thousands of enterprise clients. And then, so that's, to your point around disruption, like, I think it's easier to go and start from scratch than it would be to go take a larger enterprise business and try to cater it to the needs of the newer needs of the market.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to say it's easy, right? There's a reason why Salesforce. Yeah. There's a reason why Salesforce is still used by so many companies. There's a reason why Marketo is used by so many companies. These are mature platforms that are deeply embedded, into existing processes. I think it requires an inflection point like AI to create the imperative to have to move off, of the old system. One piece of advice I give to every company I talk to, like, look, I don't care whether, what system you're thinking about, do not sign a multi-year renewal with your existing vendor, right? It's just moving too fast right now to lock yourself into the legacy solution for more than 1 year at a time, because of the innovator's dilemma, because of these other architectural challenges Sean was just talking about.
Dude,
Yeah.
you're becoming the best friend of every post-sales organization out there.
It's tough, right? I mean,
Well, I think the real question there is like, and this is really bad to say, but like, is there ever a time where that's a great idea? And like, is pricing innovation and contract term innovation, things like value-based pricing, which I know is a complete misnomer still, but even those concepts, I wonder if those aren't also byproducts of this whole AI age, or the beginnings of.
yeah, I mean, there's obviously is a trend towards this value and consumption-based pricing. I mean, the that's not moving as fast as I thought it might have, though, because companies still
It's
like
hard to do.
Well, it's hard from the vendor side, but also buyers like predictability.
Yep.
And so I think we'll keep seeing hybrid pricing models.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm just completely rambling at this point, but like, buyers do like predictability unless they fundamentally believe that that widget is going to truly drive top line, or we wouldn't have sales reps, right?
Sure.
And so I think like the fulfillment of the promise of value is something that's very much on new and shaky ground, and that also contributes to that aspect.
I think that's very fair, especially as it applies to things that can conceivably drive revenue as opposed to cost.
Correct. Yeah, the definition of value is definitely one that is not agreed upon widely in the industry. So, John, as we wrap up, I'm curious, like, what else are you seeing out there that maybe we haven't talked through so far that's, I guess at the least definition, interesting and maybe innovative, and where are people seeing real value, to our point earlier?
Well, one thing that I've been thinking about is, there's obviously been in the last year a big rise in AI SDRs, kind of AI driven prospecting, types of capabilities. And, on the margin, I am much more bullish on using AI for personalizing the journeys of our buyers more than I am about personalizing the content.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, can we take the right action at the right time based on really understanding who you are, where you are, what's relevant to you? Even if I end up sending you basically the same, like a pre-canned email, but that email is really right for you right at that moment in time, I actually think that's better than, hey, I saw that you went to this college and you should buy my product, or whatever kind of low levels of AI personalization that we're seeing from a lot of these SDR tools. So I don't know. So that's something I've been thinking about is context and right action over personalized content.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that I see just in my personal life and within our own business, like, AI is really great at recognizing patterns and doing research. And those aren't really the things that, I mean, I'll speak for the group here, that we're really good at, and that, most people aren't really good at. And if you know your market, you should really be good at understanding like who they are, what they need, being able to create things that are compelling, for those individuals. But the age old like linear buying path is, I think, what humans come up with when we try to quantify how buyers buy, which is really anything but. I was just thinking about last week, which was Thanksgiving, and if we haven't put that context out there in this episode yet, and I was thinking about all the things that like slowed down in terms of initiatives just that are on my plate, whether it's me as a buyer or as a service provider or as an investor, and then that are going to then pick back up in like a hyper cycle, this week, next week, so on and so forth. And those are the little nuances that like the typical rev cycle modeler, that we all built back in the day, which is a straight line of like increasing interest, just is very bad at picking up. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting concept in terms of like, find out who's interested right now, what they're interested in, give me that information, and I have to fulfill on it as a human. And that, frankly, that should be my value, in my opinion, as a human in that equation.
Which is why you see a lot of people talking about signal-based marketing or signal-based outbound. kind of being so important. I don't think that's hype. I think that actually is a pretty important piece of the puzzle. And the question is, how do you get signal that's unique or valuable or proprietary to your business? So, you're not just using the exact same, new job alert that every other company's using.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, getting back to the relationships and, certainly like our approach to partners. I mean, that's the holy grail in any situation, right? Like how do I find something, it's a proprietary piece of information, understanding, how do I get access to, to deliver my take or fulfill on that need? The ability to do that with AI, I think is really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, who's gonna, your partner is the one you text and say, hey, did you hear so-and-so is looking at this, right? And then, how does AI fill that gap? That's a tough one.
Well, I think there's a lot of, like the technographic footprints that are out there that exist versus what we consume, I think is an interesting delta.
Yeah, for sure.
So Jon, I know that you guys are still in stealth mode and so on, but I mean, at the very least, folks can subscribe to you and learn about some new cocktail recipes. Where should they go and stay plugged in for the ultimate windfall here?
Yeah, no, LinkedIn is the best place to follow me for not only cocktail recipes, but also clues and hints about what I'm building and when it's coming.
And just as my last nugget there, like what you guys have the employees at this point? Like, are we getting close to some sort of a reveal?
We do have employees, and I intend to launch sometime next year.
Love it. Well, Jon, as always, thanks for coming on and sharing your take. Always interesting and great to have you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. And if you're just joining us for the first time, for God's sakes, like, subscribe, share, do all the things that we put this out every fortnight. And if you can figure out when that is, please subscribe, because I guess you're our people then. We will see you next fortnight for another episode of the Cheat Code and Friends. Thank you to Jon Miller, as always, and my two co-hosts, Mr. Josh Wagner, Sean Kester. Until next time, guys.